New Orleans Saints signed David Johnson to a practice squad deal. So David Johnson's been sitting out the whole year. He went to training camp with the New Orleans Saints for a tryout earlier in the offseason, but obviously nothing came to fruition. So David Johnson, a few seasons ago, he was the number one pick for a couple years in a row in fantasy football, but he fell off quickly, and that's what happens with running backs. They have a great 4 or 5 seasons, and then quickly they just fall apart and the body can't handle it. So David Johnson trying to reemerge in the league here. And last season with the Houston Texans wasn't a great year at all for him. 67 carries, 228 rush yards, 32 catches, 225 receiving yards, and a receiving touchdown and a fumble loss. So right now, Mark Ingram's still out for this New Orleans Saints team. I know they signed Jordan Howard a couple weeks ago as well to the practice squad, but Alvin Kamara, it doesn't look like he's going to be suspended. So in terms of fantasy football, there's got to be major injuries or something like a suspension to Alvin Kamara for David Johnson to even be considered in fantasy leagues. But it's good to see him latch on with a practice squad. He was a top talent, like I mentioned, for 4 or 5 seasons in fantasy football, and at the running back position here is David Johnson. And maybe he could carve out a role or something this year, but in this case, he'll just have no fantasy value right now. So the New Orleans Saints signed one of the better running backs in the last decade in David Johnson, and we'll see if he'll see the field at all this season for the New Orleans Saints and possibly have fantasy value for the remainder of the 22 season.